Guilds and solo leveling are so much more than just a joint group of high-level hunters. Their revenue rivals even the biggest of corporations, their power the strength of entire nations, and their influence enough to sway even governments. What makes guilds such an interesting topic to cover though is the unique way in which they've been integrated into solo leveling society. Everything from the way they treat hunters to the way they've commodified hunting just makes sense in terms of how it'd be in our own society. They've turned the very act of raiding into a business, one that's by far the most profitable in the entire world now. So, in a field where billions of dollars are at stake, to guilds a gate was nothing more than an investment. It was a means to gain access and siphon any and all loot available from within them. Only after a strict 4-stage process was completed would any high-level guild truly consider the gate they're raiding finished. So it's that way these guilds are portrayed as fundamentally different from the more traditional fantasy guilds that makes me want to talk about just how much they are. Especially since in the anime they're slowly starting to become more prominent. We've seen hints as to the fame, power, and influence they possess, but in this video here I want to portray the full scope of just how much of it they possess. It'll be a spoiler-free breakdown of everything you need to know about them. Now, since we are 8 episodes in, I'm sure you've all seen just how much more both the novel and manhwa has to offer. They're both exceptional complements to an anime that's being adapted spectacularly. I'm sure many of you have already read the manhwa, but if you truly want to experience solo leveling and know everything about Sung Jin-woo and this world of hunters, you can read all about it right here with today's sponsor, Web Novel. As the host of both the webcomic and the novel, not only can you take in the phenomenal art the manhwa is known for, but you can also see firsthand that confident, overpowered Sung that I've been talking about so much. All those instances where he's eagerly awaiting the fight rather than letting the fight come to him are all here in the novel, which I personally read on Web Novel. You'll also learn so much more about guilds, dungeons, and hunters, all of which I find makes solo leveling that much more interesting. Then, if you want to read power fantasies damn near just as good as solo leveling, you can find all sorts of comics and novels just like it. Just download the app, then search for solo leveling, and what you'll find are recommendations for similar dark fantasy right alongside it. So, whether you want to read solo leveling or find a new story just like it, you can use the link in the description to go right to it. There's an absolutely massive library of isekai and fantasy waiting for you right here at Web Novel. For now though, let's focus on solo leveling. For guilds, I think the best place to start is with what they do. Their primary purpose is to organize hunters and clear gates, but in the decade that gates have been around for now, they've grown from this vital institution that protects the people into something more like a hunter talent agency combined with a gate clearing business. They immediately headhunt any hunters that's rank B or above, get them raid ready as fast as possible, then send them out to clear gates so that more money can be made and the process repeated. It's not the exact way it works for every guild, but it seems the direct goal of most is to grow their ranks and accumulate power. Power which can only be attained through money. This is something that'll make sense a little bit later, but for now just know that money and power go hand in hand with guilds. As for the way guilds acquire business, well, when a gate opens up, it's immediately investigated by the association. The association measures the amount of magical energy being emitted from the gate, then based on that, it'll assign the gate a rank. This rank would then dictate the gate's level of difficulty, and that alone would be enough for a guild to determine whether a gate was worthwhile or not. Mainly because difficulty determines the level of monsters, and the higher level of the monsters, the more valuable the loot. So, it's when a gate is finally deemed worth doing by a guild that's when they must partake in a bidding war in order to acquire the rights to it. They can't just show up and walk in because until given a permit that says otherwise, all gates are fully owned and under the jurisdiction of the association. As the group that oversees all hunter activities in the entire country, they alone have the power to determine who can do what with gates. So, guilds bid against each other to acquire whatever gates they see fit, and the ones that remain are usually left to either freelancers or the association hunters. It's a standard process that typically leaves B and A rank dungeons to the larger guilds, C rank dungeons to the small guilds, private parties, and freelancers, then D and E rank dungeons to the hunters too weak to join anyone but the association. It's tough to say just how much each of these gates would sell for, but we do know that the standard price for C ranks are between $50,000 to $75,000. The return from them is at most $150,000, so based on that logic, you can expect guilds to bid upwards of 50% of what they plan to get back in return. Then, as it is with most things in the hunter world, the money earned from gates goes up exponentially the higher rating it is, likely making B ranks worth somewhere in the millions, and A ranks I would expect to be up there in the hundreds of millions. I mean, why else would Jinho be giving away $22 million just to become a guildmaster? There was just that much profit to be made in the gate clearing business. It's hard to convey exactly how much, but the way the novel describes it is that the profits are enough to rival even the largest corporations. There were copious amounts of money to be made from the sale of magic crystals, monster corpses, and items like artifacts and runestones. Sure, you didn't have to be a hunter to deal in this type of business, but whatever transactions were made with them had to be done using a guild as an intermediary. They were a necessary middleman that formalized the sale of high-ranking goods like these. Naturally, this meant they received a cut of whatever was sold, so if you wanted to maximize profits and keep them to yourself, your best bet was to either join a guild or make a guild of your own. The only issue with that was that there were several rules that guilds needed to abide by. Yes, they did get plenty of benefits like reduction in tax when selling loot, but that and all the others came in exchange for being on call permanently. If there was ever a time when the association or government requested your aid, regardless of where you were or what you were doing, you would have to go whether you wanted to or not. A guild simply could not ignore a summons from the association. If they did, I'm sure the penalty would be guild disbandment or even the loss of their hunter license, but more than anything, the people responsible would have to deal with the disgrace of it all. They would have lost their reputation as the protectors of the people, and not a single nation on Earth would trust them to be able to fight for them again. Like, who's to say that they won't just ignore that call to act again? So, while being in a guild definitely came with its perks, it wasn't a decision that came very easily for a hunter. What I mean is that, because of the risk the hunting part of the job came with, choosing the right guild often meant increasing your likelihood of survival. An interesting fact that ties directly into this is that the success rate of clearing A-rank gates is actually higher than the success rate of clearing lower ones. You may think that a less difficult raid would make it easier to be completed, but when the lower rank raids are being taken by guilds striving to make a name for themselves, that also means they're willing to put a whole lot more risk on themselves. This often means going in with underleveled and under-equipped hunters, general lack of synergy since some of the hunters likely haven't fought together, then all-around disorganization since the guildmaster's sights are simply set on making money. This in turn leads to more accidents, and it's those accidents which place smaller guilds into a much more ambiguous situation when compared to larger guilds. It makes them have to constantly recruit new hunters, despite them not actually being the best fit or even the right level. Now, when a large guild does finally obtain the permit for a high-ranking gate, they know how much money is on the line for completing it, and as such will dedicate every resource possible into doing so. Not only will that turn into copious amounts of money for them, but by completing the raid without any hassle whatsoever, it would show the association they're capable of doing more in the future. I mean, when you get to raids as difficult as the A rank, getting the permits for them was more than just outbidding the competition. You had to show your strike force was truly capable of it. So, when taking into consideration the difference in priorities between a small guild and a large guild, it's only natural you as a hunter would feel more safe joining a large guild. Small guilds tended to lose people more often in pursuit of making it big, whereas large guilds focused on securing the big scores in a way that was streamlined and efficient. It's two approaches to what was essentially the same task, yet one was refined and the other rough. The former of which just happened to be the safer one. If I was to compare this difference to anything, it would be best to think of it like a startup versus an already existing megacorporation. Like, if a startup wanted to grow its business and cover its finances, it would have to take on clients it probably couldn't handle and constantly expand until it got to the point that it could handle them. Generally, that made their situation a whole lot more volatile, but it also meant they could expand their business faster. Now, exchange clients with gates and expansion with the constant recruitment of new hunters, and that's pretty much the relentless cycle smaller guilds have to deal with. It's just when a small guild fails, they're also losing people, not just money. Now, unfortunately, choosing a guild wasn't a privilege every hunter had access to, since at the end of the day, everything boiled down to rank. The E and D ranks were rarely, if ever, considered, then the C ranks were who the small guild recruiters would start lining up for. The B rank was where we start getting into large guild territory, and it's here the hunters within start to get a true choice in things. They would either get an attractive offer granting leadership or part ownership with a small guild, or a fat signing bonus as a standard rotation member in a large guild. Really, it was mostly up to personal preference, since the difference between the two was would you rather be the head of a snake or the tail of a dragon. The A rank was where large guilds started to make substantial offers, and along with it came the promise of things like fame and fortune. Fame because you were guaranteed to be part of the guild's exclusive primary raiding team, and fortune because the financial reward from high-ranking dungeons was immeasurable. Combine this with a signing bonus in the millions, and you've essentially established yourself as one of the most coveted hunters in the nation. Should any of these offers not be to your liking though, the A rank was always enough to go independent and create your own guild. At that point, you were strong enough to attract competent enough hunters, and the money you'd make together would be enough to support a smaller medium guild. So, whenever looking at hunters at the A rank and above, joining a guild wasn't really necessary for them since the money and power already came with the territory. What joining a large guild provided that no one else could though was that potential of fame should you become part of the main strike force. You see, unlike small guilds where the number of hunters was only enough for one strike team, larger guilds tended to have enough to have multiple. There was the A team, which consisted of the best the guild had to offer, and they alone would be the ones to go through and complete higher rank gates. The rest were teams of mid to low level hunters, and they would be sent to complete gates not worth doing by the main team. Occasionally they would have stronger members lead raids with the weaker ones, but that was mostly for training so that the less experienced can become better. So, with a constant influx of rookies bolstering their ranks, there was always a need for veterans to help them get experience. A luxury the small guilds unfortunately couldn't afford, and is actually the core reason behind their increased number of accidents. In any case, should you be strong enough to earn a core place on a large guild's A team, then that was the equivalent of being on the starting lineup for an all-star sports team. Your name would be known to everyone who was a fan of the sport, and your status as a celebrity pretty much cemented. This is due to the amount of press large guilds tend to get, and it's actually portrayed quite well in the anime. To explain a little bit more though, the relationship between a hunter and a guild was pretty similar to that of an entertainer and a talent agency. The guild was the platform through which hunters became known, and the hunter was the star over which guilds would fight for. So, say a new S-rank hunter had just made their appearance, the amount of resources every guild would put in to recruit them would be limitless, and the coverage of what guild that person was going to sign would be incessant. It's an event that would attract the attention of the entire nation, and is actually the reason every guild tends to have one or two informants planted within the Hunter Association. Since they're the first to know about everything hunter-related, not only would an informant get more details on gates worth bidding on, but they'd also be the first to know about what hunters were worth recruiting. The primary asset that makes guilds what they are in this world. Even if a hunter wasn't going to sign with them immediately, just building a relationship was an essential part of starting the process. So it's all this extra stuff in a field that should just be about killing monsters that really makes guilds so much more than what we usually get. I mean, they've even gone so far as to give us a subtle look into the dynamic between a guild's administrative staff and the hunters they manage. Since the number of capable hunters are finite, it wasn't so easy to replace them as it was with a regular worker. That being the case, the workers would always take extra care to mind the hunters and the mood they were in. They didn't want to do anything which would make the hunter leave, since every hunter was a valuable part of making the guild larger and stronger. It was an additional burden that only these non-hunter guild workers were privy to. Now, to finally focus on the actual act of raiding, this here was how the guilds capitalized on their investments. It was the core moneymaker of their entire operations and the sole reason they could grow to the size and scale they were at. Just like how it is in any business though, the act of making money from dungeons had been refined to an art, a 4-stage process that ensured every last bit of profit could be made from it. So, first the raid team would enter and eliminate every monster aside from the boss, then after that a retrieval team would go in and drag out all the monster remains. Next, a mining team would enter and extract whatever minerals and crystals were embedded into the wall, then after that the raid team would go back in and finally kill the boss, thus closing the gate and ensuring everything that could be sold for money would be sold for money. Whether it be bones, hide, flesh, or teeth, every single part of a high-level monster was deemed useful in some way. So it was only after that and the crystals and the ores were siphoned from the dungeon that the guild would consider the gate fully conquered. It was the optimal process to ensure every ounce of profit could be made from it. That money would then be put into buying more gates and recruiting even more hunters, and it was through this loop that a guild would constantly grow itself, forever expanding in hopes of one day becoming the largest guild in the entire country. That's not always the goal of every guild, but it is the general ideal for those already large enough to compete for it. But yeah, that's the full extent of how guilds work in solo leveling. A core aspect of the series that I think everyone should know about. If you want to see more lore videos just like this, then be sure to leave a like and let me know in the comments. Now, before I go, I'm just gonna leave this as a little teaser.